What is it tonight? At least just tell me what the hell is wrong. Do you wanna eat? Do you wanna sleep? Do you wanna drown? Just settle down, settle down, settle down. I'll give you candy, give you diamonds, give you pills, give you anything you want. $100 bills. I'll even let you watch the shows you wanna see. Just marry me, marry me, marry me.
Little bit of a different intro for the show this week, and that is because there's a lot going on with the Cincinnati Bengals and in his drama. John, are you familiar with that tune?
I had the same reaction as Tim Grubbs in the chat. What is this? But I quickly put together some context clues. I'm sure that was an early 90s band expressing displeasurement with his significant other. Am I getting that? Am I on the right track there?
You are correct. It's actually an 80s band, a song from the 80s. The group is called Dramarama, and the song is Anything, Anything, and then in parentheses it says I'll give you anything, anything is the name of the song. Kind of a one-hit wonder band, but a good band for some deep tracks, and that was a classic a long time ago. But we titled the show Dramarama, and I go, their big hit is, with the contract stuff going on, with the Shamar Stewart stuff going on, which we will talk about, it just kind of was fitting, except the marriage part. But I guess the contract with the team and the player, there's a semblance of a marriage there, I guess. Regardless, just came to mind. Thought it was a little different. And apropos with all of the contracts, we might have started off the show with a copyright infringement. I don't even know, but doesn't even matter. We'll, I gave credit to the band and the song, so go on iTunes and go on all those places and get that song. And oh, by the way, you can go on iTunes and get our show, the Orange and Black Insider, part of the Believe in Cincy podcast channel, along with Talking Football with Bengal Jim and Friends. Our show, as I mentioned, 3 and Out with Jason and Kevin, which is also on our YouTube channel, as well as Matt and Willie No Ball with the coach Matt Minnick and Willie Lutz. So go get that on iTunes along when you're getting that Dramarama song. Go get our shows and or through another audio streamer. We're on the major one, so go check that out. And of course, you can get our show on the YouTube channel, Orange and Black Insider. There is a show icon underneath John's beautiful mug there on the bottom right-hand side of the screen. You can click that, click the subscribe button, do all of the things, and check out what we've got going there. We had a real fun show last week with James Rapine of Sports Illustrated, talking a long time with him, probably 45 minutes, I think, with him about the Bengals, Minicamp, etc. So go check that out if you haven't yet, and keep your eyes glued to A to Z Sports.com, where this side, John, is killing it over there with his AFC North coverage, as well as CincyJungle.com. Both of those sites have your news covered. But let's get going, and I guess we should start with the Dramarama, John, because that's what, unfortunately, is again dominating the headlines. And I will pull something up in just a second, but if things took ahead a couple of weeks ago, came to a head a couple of weeks ago, with Trey Hendrickson showing up to OTAs and, talking about, having that 20-minute press conference on the sideline and answering questions, venting some frustration in a polite way, it got a little worse as of this week. And credit to Mike Petralia, who is he's been on our show. It's been too long since we've had him on. We got to get him back on. But he posted a video because he had kind of the front and center view of Shamar Stewart, and all the great other Cincinnati media members were there. But oh, the body language. Oh, what was said and what wasn't said, John Sheeran. Not a good look from some people may say, it's the player. A lot of people are pointing fingers at the franchise at this point. So I think those who cover the team like us and the fans, etc., we go back to that song that we entered the show with. It's like, I'll give you anything. Let's just stop the drama. No injuries, no contracts, all of that stuff.
For starters, what wasn't said exactly? Because it feels like
I guess that's true. Yeah, I guess that's true.
I suppose what validates that is his exact quote was, "I can't really say what I want to say," and then he proceeded to say quite a bit. I don't really feel like he held a lot back necessarily, but no, he's very vindictive and he's standing on a lot of conviction right now with what he and his camp believes is right. And for those who may not be completely caught up, there's a major disagreement going on right now between the Bengals and Shamar Stewart over language within his contract, certain language that would make it easier for future guarantees to be voided should he do things that would create defaults in his contract. There's more context that's coming out about the situation. But there's still stuff that we don't know, the specifics in terms of the language and the verbiage in the contracts. But still, it's something that the Bengals are pushing for. It's something that the Bengals have pushed for in the past with first-round picks. And this whole type of precedent really impacts first-round picks more than any other player on the team because those contracts are fully guaranteed. So on a team without contracts with future guarantees, aside from Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase, and I guess T. Higgins, it does impact first-round picks more than anyone else. So this is why Shamar Stewart is the guinea pig in this scenario. But it's a precedent that the Bengals could establish to any contract that they give out in future years. And in a league where future guarantees are becoming more and more common, obviously they've been more and more common with other teams aside from the Bengals, but if the Bengals are entering those waters, this is something that the Bengals potentially just want to have on the books as precedent, and they're using Shamar Stewart as the precedent setter. And clearly he takes a lot of issue to that, and that's not going away. It's not that the fact that mandatory minicamp is here now, he's just going to, just suck it up and sign the deal and go back out there. No, he's standing on all 10 toes, and he does not want this. And he said a lot more than I think anyone could have possibly expected to say about the situation.
Yeah, I mean, I just froze the video at that. I mean, that is an exasperated man right there, a frustrated man. Closed fist on the chin, just exasperated. And now, unfortunately, as we have seen with the injuries and other, the Trey Hendrickson stuff, the T. Higgins stuff, this is the stuff that is dominating the headlines at Bengals workouts, Bengals practices. And so that is not a good position to be in as a franchise. You can side with whichever side that you want, if you want to take a side, but it's not a good look. And some of the things, and I may be paraphrasing here a little bit, that Stewart said was something akin to, the team cares more about winning contracts than winning games. Ouch. He basically said, I'm 100% right. Agree or disagree with that as you will, but there were some very poignant, I guess you're right. You said, what didn't he say? Maybe I misspoke a little bit there, because there were some real shots fired at Bengals leadership from Shamar Stewart about the handling of this situation. And again, coupled with this is the Trey Hendrickson situation that is still ongoing. And, you can make arguments that Shamar Stewart would play maybe the other side or move around the line a little bit, but those are two high value players on your defensive line. You have a new defensive line coach. You have a new defensive coordinator that you want to install certain things, and those guys aren't practicing. Those guys, one of them's not there. So it's not a good path to start off on for the Cincinnati Bengals, especially with the last few off seasons. We've had the T. Higgins contract situation. We had Joe Burrow injuries and all of those things. It's just another one of those off seasons until these things get resolved.
I thought that is the one thing that everyone can agree on. Like, everything that's happening right now is not good. And that's the main thing that I thought of when we first saw those clips. Like, it's genuinely not a good look for the team's first round pick to be sounding off and airing out dirty laundry during mandatory minicamp in one of the last media sessions that we're all going to have until these guys come back to training camp. And I've gotten these reactions multiple times about, like, well, of course, this is what Shamar Stewart and his agent want you to think about the Bengals. Sure, there's truth to that, obviously.
Mhm.
There's a plan of attack in terms of the messaging here. That doesn't take away from the fact that this is not good, right? Like,
Right.
the things that he's saying, regardless if it's coming out of the agent's mouth or his mouth, Shamar Stewart still has some level of autonomy here. Like, he's still in control of what he says, and he's choosing these words very carefully, and they've crafted these messages very carefully. It's not good, right? Like, even if it is designed to make the Bengals look like, you know, the corporate villains here, which in many ways they are, it's not a good look. It gets out to the national stage, and it feeds into narratives that you would think the team would want to diffuse. Clearly, the team doesn't give a flying crap about any of these narratives. They never have. And this is just another day in the office for them. So regardless if this is designed to create these headlines and anything like that, it's not a good look, and it's not a good indication of business being handled well. It's just hard-nosed business that is very customary, at least to the Bengals at this point. And you bring up Hendrickson and how these two kind of parallel. His whole quote about being 100% right, that was in conjunction with what's happening with Hendrickson. He said, you could, again, I'm paraphrasing here, but he said something to the matter of, you know, you could say that Trey, you know, that situation will be all right, and he's 99% of the right, and that 1% is because he is technically under contract. Stewart isn't under contract, so he can't be fined or disciplined for saying these things because he's technically not even an employee of the team. He's the only one, aside from Demetrius Knight Jr., who has the freedom to basically make all these claims because he can't be reprimanded because technically he's on the roster, but technically he's not an employee of the team. And that's why I think he's taking the stance in a very vindictive way, because, like, the team doesn't have complete control over him yet, at least contractually. Like, they have his rights and everything like that. And he can't play football unless it's with the Bengals. But this is the path that he's taking. This is the path that his agent is taking. I think we both agree that it's not a path that it typically ends up well for the player, and the team still has a lot of leverage at this point. But yeah, it's plain and simple. Everyone can agree that what's happening right now is not good, regardless of the intricacies of why the messages are the messages.
I'm gonna expand a step further on that. Yeah, it's not good for the player development wise, and, you know, missing practices, camaraderie, all of that. But it's also bad for the team, not only for the, you know, the public perception, but it's bad for the team because their first round pick isn't there and potentially participating and contributing like they need basically right away in some capacity because of the needs of the defense and how bad it struggled the past 2 years. So this is just with both of these situations, it's just not a good look for the team. And like you said, I think the frustrating thing, again, for better, for worse, with the Brown family, Blackburn family, when the bullets start flying publicly, they're nowhere to be found. They are nowhere to be found. They don't tell their side of the story. Maybe they feel almost entitled to the fact that they don't want to tell their side of the story, or they feel like it may be misconstrued even further if they do say something. We've seen that happen before, especially with Mike Brown, and the fuel just gets even more added to the fire. But it's still a frustrating situation where you don't even have someone in the leadership capacity that comes out and says, hey, you know, we're working diligently on this. We're really trying to work this out. Even if it's a super diplomatic, not throwing Stewart under the bus or anything like that, just something, address the situation. And there is very little to none of that going on with really either of these guys. And unfortunately, that onus oftentimes falls, you can go back to Marvin Lewis. It falls on the head coach more often than not to take the shots, the questions, the tough questions, all of that. And then to a lesser degree, Duke Tobin. And the others really kind of don't take those questions, or don't. They're also not pro. We complain about the reactivity and versus proactivity in how they do their operations. This is still another example of that. Of being reactive or non-reactive. Definitely not proactive to get in front of a situation like this, at least not publicly. But they're sitting back and just he can say what he wants. If Shamar Stewart thinks he's 100% right, I guarantee you the Browns and the Blackburns feel that they are 100% right, and we have seen that so many times with this team in contract negotiations.
It's funny because the only semblance of a statement about this was made to the Inquirer almost exactly a month ago. This was a part of the story that Kelsey Conway put together about the first initial details of why this was happening. And the team released a statement saying, quote, "We expect that as other first round draft picks get signed, this will get resolved," which leads to the fact that so Walter Nolan was the 16th overall pick and Gray Zabel was the 18th overall pick. Both of those guys are now signed. Typically, that means that the financial framework is set, right? The rookie wage scale does a tremendous job of that. The only thing that can be negotiated is the language and how some cash of the contract gets paid out in terms of the timing and the payments and whatnot. So based off that statement, that would lead anyone to believe that they would be looking at the language in both of Nolan's and Zabel's contract and say, hey, like these guys were picked before and after you, you're basically locked into this sort of draft spot placement. And we kind of got you now, like in terms of leverage. If that's not the case, then this could continue to go on. But having those picks signed should help get this across the goal line, unless language in those contracts differ. So that's the only semblance of any communication from the team. And obviously, the team has a very horrid reputation in terms of communication. But just real quick, I feel like I just have to say this though. Like, how many anyone listening to this, you included, Anthony, there is a Bengals fan in your life that has definitely thought or uttered the words, the team cares more about winning negotiations than winning games. We've said it multiple times on this podcast this year. This guy has been here for 6 weeks, and he's saying things that fans of for life have been saying for the last 30 years, and it's just so genuinely funny. Regardless of how you think he's handling the situation, regardless of the semantics and the specifics of the situation itself, the fact that those were the exact words that came out of his mouth is just so funny to me for this offseason specifically.
Yeah. T. Brookie says there are a lot of people acting like they know what's in the contract. We don't know what the Bengals put in. I mean, I guess, yeah, that's correct. But also, as you mentioned, both of the other picks sandwiched around him were their deals have been done. And usually that's, again, the reactive part of the Bengals. That's when they go, okay, well, we look at these and boom, this is how we structure this. Not happening here. And Robert Obrecht says Shamar is right. In my opinion, the players support him. So I think the fans should as well. You just mentioned something about Shamar Stewart talking about that, about winning contracts instead of games. Didn't he kind of allude to the fact that, there are some players that understand his position and kind of feel a little bit the same way, right? I mean, wasn't that kind of part of the
star players? Yeah.
And so that in itself is a pretty damning comment as well. I want to get your thoughts on this one too, Les. A lot of good show regulars in the comments. I like this, but it feels that Shamar Stewart wasn't the Bengals' first choice and therefore all this haggling. But if you're not sure about a set player, why the hell do you draft him in the first place? That's a slippery slope. I think the consensus opinion was that they were all over Walter Nolan and probably would have grabbed him had he went one pick later, but he did not. And so I think at the point where they picked and who was on the board, he was their first choice. So right. Otherwise they wouldn't have picked him. Yeah. But I mean, maybe not, maybe they thought a couple of other players that they preferred were there. So I don't know that bears a ton of weight where, we didn't actually want this guy and now we're going to stick it to him type of thing. I don't know that's the situation there. But again, this just gets uglier and uglier. And instead of talking about, wow, look at this team poised for a Super Bowl, look at how great Joe Burrow looks and who's impressing. This is the deal that we have, it's headlining the camp, it's headlining our show, all of it. And it's frustrating.
It's definitely bad from the outside. I'm not gonna lie, like I have thought that exact sentiment as well in terms of like why they're doing this with him specifically. Mm-hmm. Like we know for a fact that like Shamar wasn't the absolute top player on their board when the draft began. Like that's just never
Right,
the case,
right.
right? So and yeah, like there was a lot of evidence that pointed to the fact that Walter Nolan was very likely their top target if he was available, and then he went a pick prior. But I think regardless of who's the pick, they were going to try to go this route contractually. Like according to Max Murphy, who is Miles Murphy's brother, this was a case with Miles's negotiations. Like, and they eventually got that language to be taken out or amended, whatever the case may be. And that was the same case with Marius Mims. Like the language was the same. And that's the exact point that Shamar is making. Like for past contracts, it's been this, and now you're trying to change it with me. And I understand him particularly like saying like, why me? Like, why am I the guy that you're trying to do this with, even though they've done this with guys in the past and those situations were handled differently. We don't know the specifics of what they're trying to negotiate out, if they're trying to make just total complete changes or just a little tweaks here and there, or maybe specifying certain language, whatever the case may be. I don't think this is specifically like we're doing this to Shamar Stewart because we have doubts about him as a player. I don't think that's the case at all.
Oh yeah. I'm in agreement with you there. And it is a tough situation because you have the team on one hand saying, hey, we got to start setting this precedent in our contracts, maybe as a team protective type of language, that sort of thing. But you, like you said, you have the player in the other corner going, well, why do I have to be the first guy to do it? Well, it's got to be somebody. If it's not Shamar Stewart and the team is trying to impress this upon somebody, it's got to be somebody. I don't know if it's going to be Shamar Stewart or not. I don't know how long this is going to drag out, but the unfortunate part is the team is apparently set on structuring a rookie contract, a first-round rookie contract, a certain way, and no player wants to be the first person to have it that way. So I don't know, man. It's definitely a tug of war for sure.
Good news is, I guess, like he's in the meetings, he's doing all that, extra work on the side and everything like that. He's there. And the guy who isn't there, Trey Hendrickson, they've kind of been through this before with him. So, Joe Burrow was asked about, is all this a distraction? And he didn't lie. So, of course, it's a distraction when one of your best players isn't there. Like, that's just what it's going to be. But I think the team is almost conditioned at this point to kind of manage these things, and they're kind of used to it. And that's not a good thing necessarily. Like, this shouldn't be the norm, but it just is for them. And I feel like because the entire offense is all there, there's a sense of continuity there. They're kind of firing on all cylinders, or as much as you can be in the middle of June. And the defense is dealing with, similar complaints for the player that has had these complaints in the past. They know what Trey Hendrickson is capable of. There's not going to be this ramp up period to get him implemented in the scheme. Like he is who he is, right? And with Shamar Stewart having never played a game, it sucks to not have that on-field development, but he's also a complete unknown, and he wasn't in the plans like on April 24th, and all of a sudden he was in the plans April 25th. So I think as far as a distraction sense, I think things are better than maybe what they appear to be on the outside. But again, like from our perspective, like this is the dominant talking points of the conversation, and that's not where you want to be for a team that has Super Bowl aspirations.
If you have to be asked if something is a distraction, it's a distraction,
right?
Because it's a distraction because you're, instead of talking about another topic, a positive topic, that sort of thing, you're being asked if something is a distraction. So that is, in theory, distracting you from other things going on. So we'll see what happens with all of this. The longer this drags on, the worse it gets. Let's hope to God both of them don't drag into training camp, because again, that's going to dominate the headlines there as well. So something's got to give. We will see what happens from both sides of the Shamar Stewart contract, as well as a potential extension for Trey Hendrickson. We will keep you updated here. We'll keep you updated on CincyJungle.com and A to Z Sports to all the things going on with that. But let's move on. The Bengals said goodbye to a longtime veteran, and it was a long time coming. Did not take long for Jermaine Pratt to find a new home. He has been signed by the Raiders reportedly. And I said it before we took the air, time's a bit of a flat circle, my friend. He had the biggest play of his career, arguably, and one of the biggest plays in Bengals history with the interception against the Raiders to win their first playoff game in forever. And so Jermaine Pratt now is gone. Why it took this long, not really sure. But, this has been on, maybe it is the Demetrius Knight stuff that you talked about and that sort of thing. But he is no longer a Cincinnati Bengal. He is a Las Vegas Raider. Jermaine Pratt now officially released from the team.
Not just a Raider, but he was due to make $5.3 million this year, along with a couple $100,000 in incentives. He signed with the Raiders for a base value of like $4.3 million with another $500,000 incentives. So more or less, it's like $1 million downgrade in terms of pay, which for a guy who was released in June, who clearly didn't have the best season in 2024 in his most recent tape, not the worst scenario. And according to Jordan Schultz, who I think was one of the first to report the signing, there was apparently a robust market for him. So, 26 minutes into the show, I'm gonna take the defense of the Bengals here for a change. A lot of the complaints were about the timing of this release and why it took so long. Why were they holding on to Jermaine Pratt for so long? This was the same thing with Jair Alexander, the cornerback for the Green Bay Packers, who was a much better player than Jermaine Pratt. They were discussing a pay cut for Alexander. They were obviously interested in trading him. No trade market ever materialized, and he didn't want the pay cut. So right before mandatory minicamp, where he would have had to show up or he would have been subjected to fines, they released Alexander, and that was the exact same timeline that the Bengals took with Jermaine Pratt. So if they knew that he had a good shot of landing on his feet really soon after getting released, and this wasn't going to be putting him in limbo in the middle of summer, I don't think the Bengals necessarily did him as wrong as maybe public perception would have had it seem. Maybe that's just how it turned out. It was all a coincidence. And obviously, if they knew that he wasn't in the future plans and they knew that he wasn't going to have this crazy trade market where they couldn't even get a 7th round pick for him, like any sort of pick for him, right? So if they knew that, then maybe it would have made sense to release him sooner, where he could have gotten slightly more on the open market. But I think this ended up about as well as expected for both Pratt and the Bengals now, considering that he's not still out there and they don't look like evil, an evil team for holding on to him for so long.
Yeah. I was going to say it's probably a win-win at this point, and it just obviously it was a matter of when it was going to happen. And it's a good point about the Jair Alexander release as well. There was a question. We'll get to that in just a second, but let me see here. Where was it? I want to address this. T. Brookie again says, on a positive note, love the press conference with Al Golden. If you go back to our chat with James Rapine last show, he talked pretty glowingly about how Al Golden carries himself and what he has been attempting to build in early practices here. So go back and check that out. But yes, Al Golden is impressive. James said himself that he carries himself as a head coach. He was a former head coach, so that makes a lot of sense there, but carries himself as such and at the pro level, and with him being a college head coach, that sort of thing. So and then there was one more I think someone had asked, I'm trying to find the comment, that do you think the Bengals then, because they have not gone after a veteran corner as of yet, really on the outside, and it's Tim Grubbs here says, any chance we sign Jair Alexander? It would have to be extremely team friendly, and I don't, given what we just spent the first 20-25 minutes talking about, a guy who has a Pro Bowl background, I don't know that he's chomping at the bit to come and get into a potential contract war with the team. I'm not saying that will or won't happen, but I think that obviously the idea is interesting and it's going to feed well into our next segment as well. But I think it makes sense for the Bengals, but I just don't know if the player would be overly interested at this point, especially with some of the things that have got a groundswell of, despite how accurate or not you think some of those rumblings are.
Yeah, I think Alexander's probably slightly more affordable, maybe because he's had a lot of injury issues in the past in recent years. This is still a team that, like, even after the Marvin Lewis era, like Eli Apple was a former first-round pick at cornerback that was, gotten on the low, and he was kind of a reclamation project. You can go back so many different cases under Marvin Lewis where Newman. That was the case at this specific position, like former first-round cornerbacks. Adam Jones, obviously another one. Nate Clements, I believe he might have been the second rounder, but yeah, Terrence Newman as well. Yeah. Like the list goes on and on about that position specifically. It's it's one where they definitely value pedigree. So Alexander fits that box, but in a very casual way of saying, I think he's about a year or two away in terms of falling off the cliff where like then the Bengals would get involved. He might be a little bit too more pricey and he's too closer to the elite play for them to actually get involved. So I think they're still maybe 2 years away from getting into the Alexander.
Yeah. It's the Carlos Dansby thing, right? They had him visit, in 1 year, and then 2 years later you sign him. And it's like, who is this guy now? We see it. That's a really, really funny point. Yeah, wow, left me a little speechless there, which is a rarity. But we'll see what happens. I do think obviously veteran corner is something that they may keep an eye on. I just don't know. Again, the price tag here doesn't make sense, and will he take some sort of incentive laden contract because of the injuries? If that's what the Bengals propose, we'll see. But good player, obviously, when he's healthy, he's a good player. But Cincinnati obviously needs a lot of help on their defense, particularly with the situations regarding Shamar Stewart and Trey Hendrickson. So we'll see. But Jermaine Pratt has been released. Obviously, a lot of people knew that already, and is now quickly picked up by the Raiders and for a somewhat similar contract, as you mentioned, John. So I think it's a good move for both parties. And who knows? Pete Carroll's now with the Raiders. He obviously built some great defenses with the Seahawks, and maybe just the change of scenery for Jermaine Pratt might raise his play a little bit. Obviously, time is undefeated. Father Time is undefeated, so we'll see how long he can prolong his career. Hopefully, he continues. He made a heck of a lot of plays. I mean, it seemed like when there was a big turnover, Jermaine Pratt was usually involved in it in some capacity. Yes, the Derek Carr interception. Yes, remember the Kelsey strip in the that from behind there. That was a great play. The play in the playoff game against the Ravens where Sam Hubbard took it. He and Logan Wilson were right there batting that ball out. So while he had in more recent years an unfortunate knack of missing tackles and that sort of thing, there were a lot of moments. I think even in the Steelers game, he had a turnover, did he not? Or one of the final games of the year, I think he had an interception of some kind. So he was a guy who made, some solid, big plays for the team. He had a couple of solid years for them, but kind of production fell off the last couple of years. So it was time. And, maybe a change of scenery does him some good.
It is interesting. 2 of the 3 released players to the Bengals end up going to the Raiders. Alex Kappa released back in March. 2 days later, signed with the Raiders, right? I think in like a 2-year deal, not just a 1-year deal. So those guys are reunited. Also, how many players can say they picked off Tom Brady? Not a lot, I guess. But he did that. Well, arguably his most impressive in terms of athletic feat to be able to get it like that one hand while he's on the ground. And a lot of those plays were like a lot of those plays were just instinct. It had nothing really to do with like open field athleticism. So, he's 29. I think at this point he's past his athletic prime, but you put him in the right situations. I think his instincts can take over and he can make some plays in a contract year. And that was obviously his best year in Cincinnati in 2022 when he was playing for a new contract. So that you can never discount that.
Yeah. Well, we're going to continue on the defensive side of things because that is obviously the side that needs the most work. And if you've been tuning in over the past, we didn't do it last week because we were really focused. We had the long chat with James, and then we focused a little bit more on what we're looking for in minicamp. And we didn't mention that we were looking for the contract drama. We were looking at specific players, but that's neither here nor there. We just talked about Jair Alexander, the corner, a veteran corner coming in maybe from the outside that could bolster this group. Now, you mentioned not only do the Bengals have a long track record, particularly in outside free agency, maybe quote unquote bargain bin. Let's see what we can get out of these guys. And they did get of the names you and I mentioned, between Clements, between Newman, and Jones. They got good things out of those guys for a number of years. You could even say Reggie Nelson, who was a safety, but former high picks. And so that's where Jair Alexander makes some sense, but the Bengals themselves, even on their roster, that guys they have drafted, they have a number of high picks at cornerback, defensive back, right? You can go across the board, DJ Turner and Cam Taylor-Britt, who is one of our first make or break players. And this guy as well. And I don't think one argument can be made that I don't think he's had a real fair shake of things, both a lot of which outside of his control, which is positional changes, which is injuries, all kinds of different things have kind of popped up for Dax Hill. But this is now, the final straw here. He's got to find a fit. He's got to be able to play. We know he's got athleticism, speed, etc. He has flashed when he has been in there. I always go back to that. I think it was the 2023 season when Browning ended up taking over for Burrow after that wrist injury. But I swear, man, I'd have to look up what his passes defended were that year, but I swear he had his hands and dropped or whatever, probably another 3 or 4 interceptions that year. And then, we always talk about the one against the Jags where he had it in his hands and then the guy catches it in the back of the end zone. It's a touchdown instead of an interception in the end zone. But regardless, Dax Hill has a lot to prove this year. Obviously staying healthy is the name of the game. And this is probably one of the biggest, I hate to use the word reclamation project with him, but this is probably one of the biggest projects for Al Golden this year. And if he can get Dax Hill to be an effective player in this defense, that would be a major feather in his cap going forward, because I think that it doesn't have to be, Pro Bowl level, but getting some solid play, consistent play out of Dax Hill would be pretty critical for this defense.
I think I'm going to switch things up here a little bit. I think that Dax Hill is one of the biggest make or break players for the Bengals coaching staff in general. I think it's important for them to see what he can do for real, like this year. I think for him, the player, him having the 5th year option already attached to him, like he's on the team through 2026. Like he's got a guaranteed almost $13 million salary in 2026. He's not going anywhere for the next 2 years. And the fact that he's coming off of an injury, he may not be 100% himself for at least part of this upcoming season. You would like to think that him still being young and incredible, arguably their best athlete on defense, period. Like that definitely helps you recover from these injuries a lot quicker than some other guys, especially combined with youth. But it may take him a little bit to become the full fleshed out player that he has the potential to be. But I don't think there's any excuses for the Bengals coaching staff in general to figure out where to put this guy and where to put him in the best position to succeed, because there's promise at cornerback with DJ Turner, Cam Taylor-Britt in a contract year, Josh Newton, who flashes a rookie. There's no set in stone answers. There's nowhere in this secondary outside of safety, because you don't want to put him at safety again because that didn't work out. There's nowhere at cornerback that you wouldn't feel excited about Dax Hill. And it's just about finding where he fits in conjunction with the other guys in terms of making sure that they are in a good spot to succeed as well. So you want to have the entire group, put together in a conducive way where everyone is kind of hitting their stride and everyone feels comfortable with their roles. And Dax Hill is such a huge component of that as soon as he gets back and healthy. I think he said to Dan Hort or maybe to other reporters today, he's still a couple weeks out from being ready to kind of contribute in that way. He may have to wait a couple weeks in training camp to be fully cleared and everything like that, but he's going to have an opportunity in camp to win back a starting job. And he may not be, again, the best version of himself, but I think it's so critical for the Bengals. They can't wait until next year to be like, okay, where are we going to play Dax Hill? No, you need to figure that out this year, and probably before the season starts, so that you have some clarity on defense, because I think so long as he's healthy, he can succeed both in the slot and on the boundary. I think there is an argument to be made that he might be better in the slot because that's where he played in college, but he did show a lot of promise before he got hurt last year in those 5 games. And I think it would have silenced a lot of people had he stayed healthy at that spot. So it's really about the Bengals just figuring out once and for all where to put Dax Hill, because you can't go into the actual last year of his contract still not knowing the answer to that question.
I still lean slot for me because of his performance in college, kind of a hybrid player a little bit for Michigan, and just with the athletic tight ends and that sort of thing. And then, like you said, coming back from an injury, maybe the ask of a slot guy initially is a little bit less than true boundary corner, right? I mean, you still have tall asks, but in terms of, you're working oftentimes more in a shorter space, a shorter area, right? From the slot. But regardless, you're right. I mean, there are flashes of both where you go, okay, that makes sense. Well, that makes sense. Or boundary and then kick into slot, that sort of thing. And then you bring a DJ Turner or, whatever as he kicks into the slot. But he's we know, I don't have his RAS in front of me, but I mean, he's a tradesy guy, and
well over 9.
I could say that confidently without even looking. But yeah, he's a tradesy guy, and he's a guy that you just to your point, you absolutely have to figure out where that piece of the puzzle fits in, because if you do, I think he could be a really, really good player for this defense. But you just, I can't just hammer it home enough. You have to figure it out. And like you said, he's not going anywhere the next 2 years. So when we do these make or breaks, it's not just, oh, he's in trouble of being cut. It's not so much that. It's sometimes a player like Dax, it's like, you got to find your place. You got to find your fit. And like you said, the onus is on the coaching staff to figure that out. If you, John Sheeran, had your Al Golden headset on and your little quarter zip Bengals fleece on. Oh yeah. What would you do with them? What would you do? Would you play slot? Would you say, hey, boundary, or would you say boundary, kick into slot? What would you do?
I have to credit Jake Lisco for this of Locked On Bengals, because I think he put it perfectly. Make him Leon Hall. Leon Hall was outside in some cases, but he moved into the slot when he needed to in nickel. And I feel like you have the perfect athlete for that. Obviously, make sure that he's comfortable coming off of this injury to do both. But you have this such a dynamic weapon in the secondary who, if his only weakness is, turning passes defense into interceptions, he can cover anyone. Like there's nothing athletically that he can't do in man and in zone and in catch coverage, whatever the case may be, in press. Like he's got the length to do that as well. Like he can do anything. And I feel like now, like we don't have full clarity on what the scheme is in terms of the secondary, but you're starting to see, guys, follow receivers in coverage in motion, and maybe not sticking to just one side of the formation, which was the case under Anarumo. I think you're going to have situations where you have Turner going into the slot, you have Taylor Britt going into the slot. I don't think that should be any different with Dax Hill if he is one of your starting cornerbacks. I think you'll see him at both, kind of positions, but where he succeeds most, I think that's kind of up for him to show us on the field. But I wouldn't have any reservations about moving him all over, both outside and inside of cornerback. I think he can handle anything.
I'd agree with that. Yeah, it's just right now for me, it's just be healthy, and then figure what the rest should fall into place. Do you think that? I guess this doesn't even really matter too much anyway, but I guess it's worth kind of mentioning. Do you think that Lou Anarumo just was not the coach to know what to do with him? Or do you think he was like, well, he could play safety for it? Do you think there were some defensive deficiencies after a couple of years of free agency attrition, and it was just kind of like, well, we got to try him here. We got to get him on the field. The safety thing, like you said, didn't work so great. Do you think Golden is the key, I guess, to unlocking this, or was it? Are you still kind of a little concerned that we're not going to see the potential reached regardless?
I think that he's got the best chance out of all of these picks that haven't worked out yet to actually succeed, because that is what his profile indicated coming out of college. He was so good in college. He has the athleticism, he has the movement skills to translate from that level to the NFL. And even more so, I think, than a guy like Myles Murphy. I'm much more confident in Dax Hill as a prospect turning an NFL player. Obviously, this is year 4, and you're way past that at this point, but he's played enough, I think, where he should be comfortable starting a full season should he be healthy. And I think he was the prime example of this disconnect between, the personnel staff and the coaching staff in terms of these draft picks, because I don't think obviously Lou Anarumo didn't want to lose Jesse Bates, but I think if he wanted to replace Jesse Bates, it probably wouldn't have been Dax Hill, which is why, he rarely saw the field as a rookie, and I don't think he was set up to succeed taking over for one of the best free safeties in the league as a second-year player who hardly played as a rookie, and then obviously they needed him at cornerback, so they just moved him all around the secondary without a cohesive plan. So I don't know if Al Golden is specifically the guy to do it, but I think if he is going to be the person to maximize these players, Dax Hill has the best chance of actually fulfilling his potential, I think.
Okay. That's fair. Yeah. I again, the traits are there. The athleticism is there. Was it last year, maybe against the Ravens, the first game, where he flew down the sideline and he was maybe a step or two behind, and then he kind of got in there and knocked the ball away. And that was where I was like, wow, the closing speed, even after quote unquote being beat, it would seem, you're streaking down the sideline. And I remember that play going, wow, I mean, that's a hell of a play. And those are the flashes that he has shown at a number of different spots. So we'll see what they do with him. I do think, whether it is his primary role or not, I do think the slot does suit him well in certain situations and against certain matchups. We can talk about what the Ravens do. They get all kinds of quirky with some of their receiving weapons and stuff. So maybe that makes sense in a matchup like that. And these are some of the guys, again, we talked about, you had mentioned this, and I've kind of echoed this since, a guy like Cam Sample, maybe that's a guy you just didn't really think about because he's injured, but you quietly miss, and maybe he got you a stop or two more in one of those Ravens games or something like that. Same with Dax Hill. Maybe he was just one of those guys where, particularly when you saw down the stretch, those last 4 or 5 games where the defense started to play better, some of the young guys really started to step up and play better. Had he been healthy, maybe he would have been one of those guys where you go, oh, this year, 2025, this guy's going to kill it. But you don't think about it because, unfortunately, the injury, right? And he just wasn't there. So I almost kind of put him a little bit in that sample boat that you mentioned a few weeks back, where it's like, you don't really think about him because, unfortunately, you think about him, but you didn't really think about his potential impact down the stretch or in those critical games, that first Steeler game, the second Ravens game, that sort of thing, where you go, man, could he have provided one extra turnover? Could he have gotten one extra stop that would have made the difference and got the Bengals into the playoffs?
I kind of look at him as like, he may not make the Jermaine Pratt play, but I think he just allows you to not worry about a position and allows other guys to play more freely. Like, he kind of helps, like, he's an important cog in the system to make it all kind of flow perfectly, where then you have your actual playmakers, the guys that will get their hands on the balls and create turnovers. Like, he allows those plays to happen because he's doing his job better than almost anyone else on defense, because again, he's got the athleticism to cover up with any wide receiver in the NFL. I truly believe that he's that good of an athlete, and it's just about getting him on the field and getting him more comfortable. And that's why it's so critical for him to have as much of a full training camp as possible, because if he does have the chance to start, I don't think that there's, I know for a fact there's not 3 better cornerbacks on this team, and I know for a fact that he makes this defense better when he's out there.
Yeah, I would agree with you on that. Well, that is our latest make or break player, Dax Hill. Again, not saying, oh, he's fighting for his Bengals roster life. We got to, you want to get this defense turned around. You got to figure out how to best use him. He's got to stay healthy. Again, a lot of this stuff is not really in Dax Hill's control, unfortunately. He's at the whim of what the coaches kind of play him and where they play him and that sort of thing, as well as freak injuries happen, and that's kind of been the case with him thus far. But if he stays healthy, I think the sky is the limit for a guy like Dax Hill, particularly against some of the AFC elite offenses, that sort of thing. We're going to get on out of here, drop the mic, and close up shop. I don't know that I got much more because I opened the show with Dramarama, man. So what do you got for us on the way out, John?
Yeah, if we do get demonetized or copyright flag, throw Dramarama some money. I'm sure they've been fiending for any sort of YouTube, like, hey, that's us. We got to cash in.
Yeah.
Other than that, U.S. Open week, wearing the 2022 hat here. Shout out Ben Griffin, who won his first tournament, like solo tournament, a couple weeks ago. I've been following him on TikTok, Anthony, and he does more behind the scenes content than any pro golfer I've ever seen. He gives like an in-depth look at like the weekly schedule, like just his pre-practice routine and all the amenities that golfers do. So he's kind of like the people's champion right now. I don't know how he's going to fare at Oakmont when the rough is like 10 feet high, But I'm rooting for him.
I'll say, like, yeah, that's really neat. I'll put this out to the listeners, and yeah, we always ask you for stuff, like leave us a review and all this kind of stuff. But we are not on TikTok. If you want us to be on TikTok, if you will, eat up the clips, that sort of thing, whether it's just our show or the whole Believe channel, Believe in Cincy channel, I should say. Let us know. Let us know in the comments. If you want a TikTok channel, we'll feed we will whet the appetite if it is there. So if you want that, let us know in the comments or comments of the show, comments on YouTube, that sort of thing. Let us know. We will get to work on that if that's your thing. But thank you, John, for your time, your insight, your knowledge, everything. Let's hope the contract stuff gets figured out sooner than later. We will not do Dramarama on the way out, by the way. We'll just do our normal outro.
Anything.
All right. Take care, everybody.